Hello, and welcome to the Mothers of All Crime. This is a podcast where we deep dive into mothers involved in infamous crimes and scandals. I'm Monica, and this is Crystal.
Welcome back to the Mothers of All Crime. How are we doing, Crystal?
I'm good. How are you?
So good. We're going to be talking about Take Care of Maya today, which is a Netflix documentary that I really enjoyed. What did you think?
I got very invested in this one. Granted, we invested in all of them, but for this one, for some reason, it really hit different for me. And it's a newer documentary. It came out in 2023, so in it's very relevant, and I think that's part of it. Where we
Yeah.
saw with like a history of some other big cases that have happened over the last couple years, how it impacted this one
Mhm.
more than I would have thought if this had happened maybe 10 years earlier. So, yeah, there were a lot of feels in this one for me.
A lot of
What about you?
feels. Yeah, I thought I don't want to call them characters, but the main people involved very compelling. You really felt for them. And it's such a unique, well, I guess it's not that unique, but it feels like such a unique, bizarre thing. And it's just you go on a journey with the family and you really feel for them and you really root for them. And I don't always feel that watching these documentaries. So I don't know.
Mhm.
It was good. I got very invested as well. And I did a lot of like side Googling and stuff while watching it.
Yeah, and again, anything when it comes to children, I think that also hits a little harder, which
Definitely.
it shouldn't. Like, human life is human life, but when it comes to kids and the kids' lives being affected, it it has a different impact, I think, because they can't really speak up for themselves, and when they do, they're not taken seriously.
Yeah.
Uh we have, oh, well, you're just a child, or they don't know any better, or these excuses, or and they're not able to articulate how they're truly feeling. And I think Maya, throughout, because she did end up coming into the documentary at the end, like, she does a very good job of articulating herself. I think
Mhm.
kids in general, when they are in pain, know how they're feeling. They might not be able to describe the pain to you, but they know that they're in pain. And when people don't validate that, I think it's a very dangerous slope, just because they're a child. Like, if an adult sits there and says, I'm in pain, they go, oh, okay, let me address that. And I don't think kids always are got the same respect when it comes to that kind of stuff.
I definitely agree. And there was times watching this that I felt very frustrated. I mean, we deal with a lot of intense topics in this documentary, from child abuse to a severely ill child to mental health issues, legal issues, self-harm, suicide. It's intense and it's heavy, and I agree. I thought Maya, who the documentary is centered around, is Maya Kowalski. She's in the documentary and I do think she does a beautiful job explaining, but you do see her get very emotional, obviously talking about everything. And there's many videos also that show her at different ages in different levels of distress, which are hard to watch as well.
Yeah. All right. So you want to kick us off with Little Maya?
Yeah, so I mean, the documentary opens up with the dad Jack and the mom Beata, and the daughter Maya. They have a very nice family life. They seem like they have a beautiful home and they have good careers, and the mom is a nurse, the father is a firefighter, and he ends up retiring, spends a lot of time at home. Seems like they had a lot of fertility issues trying to have their first child, but they end up having Maya and they end up having her brother Kyle. And so they have this white picket fence, literally, and a nuclear home, and everyone seems very happy and well. And then it kind of takes a turn when Maya starts having strange symptoms and dealing with a lot of health issues.
Yeah, and having a nurse for her mom, it really showed in the documentary. Like, she became very invested on making her daughter well, as
Hmm.
any mother or parent would. They're really started zoning in, and then she took extensive notes, did extensive research, trying to figure out what was wrong, because Maya was in chronic pain all of the time. And the results of all of her diligence came that Maya was diagnosed with, and I'm gonna CRPS, complex
Yes,
regional pain syndrome, super
exactly.
rare neurological disease, and basically causes severe chronic debilitating pain, and it's really really hard to manage that pain. And
Yes.
again, like kind of I just said, now we have a small child, crazy pain, probably can't articulate it perfectly because I think she was around 10 when she got diagnosed. And her mom was just trying to get it so her daughter had a good quality of life. And the
Hmm.
US just wasn't able to originally kind of maintain that minimal pain so her daughter could be a kid.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the first few doctors they saw were totally brushing Maya and her mother off. And they were trying to say that she had anxiety and that was causing all of her shortness of breath and her pain. And maybe she's exaggerating. And it wasn't until they saw that, like Dr. Kilpatrick, that someone started to take them seriously. And you're right. They tried to do some treatments in the States, but they didn't have a lot of success with it. She was doing really low doses of ketamine, which I think people know is like special K, like a party drug, but it's really a pain management thing too. And she was taking the low doses and it was not touching her pain. And CPRS is this strange disease where it feels like your skin is burning all of the time. Maya wasn't able to walk. She wasn't able to lift her hands. Her feet were completely turned in. It was extremely debilitating. So her parents were desperate, especially her mom, and they end up going to get a treatment that you can only get in Mexico called a ketamine coma, which sounds very terrifying, and it was very terrifying. She was just on extremely high
Yeah.
doses of ketamine for 6 days, basically in a medically induced coma. And the crazy thing is, it pretty much worked. She was way better after the coma. Her pain was a lot better. She did have some side effects, but it seems like it was a lot more manageable, and she had a lot more range of motion, and she was having success in physical therapy and able to live her life and actually enjoy things. So it was a great success, and they were able to maintain her comfort and quality of life on much lower doses of ketamine. um so things were going pretty good until they I, I wasn't really sure what the relevance was, but there was a hurricane in Florida, which happens all of the time in Florida. And during the
Right.
hurricane, but did that have something to do with it? I was trying to look it up and it doesn't seem like it has any effect. But
No,
I mean, I don't
I
know.
don't
I think
really
it was just the
think
timing.
so. I think it was
Okay.
the timing to give like like viewers kind of a time reference, because it was a pretty significant hurricane and it's within the lifetime of a lot of people. But I also, and have nothing to back this up, wonder if it was just stress inducing, because
Mm,
Maya had that flare up, and I'm wondering if there's a connection with stress and anxiety to the flare ups. I don't know if that's true, but
it
that was
could
my
be.
only other thought on how it could be relevant, because I did the same thing and I was like, it's
Unless it's
Florida.
like the
Like,
barometric pressure. I don't know. Regardless, Beata was at work and the dad, Jack, is at home with Maya. She's having horrible pain, screaming in pain. I can't imagine dealing with that kind of a situation. But Jack, like most people would do, puts her in the car and takes her to the emergency room, which is, I think, pretty much always the right thing to do in that situation.
right.
Um, and so he takes her there and he's trying to explain at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. He's trying to explain about her condition, about her doctors, and about the treatment that she receives and has received and what she needs. And the doctors aren't really understanding, and they're not they're not just immediately agreeing to do the treatment that she's gotten before, and they're kind of skeptical. And he calls Beata, puts her on the phone. She's barking instructions, and no one's really liking that either. And she shows up about an hour later, and the staff described her as belligerent, saying that she needs ketamine and you guys don't know what you're doing and stuff like that, basically. So it's a tense situation. Maya is very, very ill, and her parents are desperately trying to get her medication that will help, and the hospital has some concerns. And that kind of brings us to the head of where this all starts to take even a worse turn.
Yeah, and I think like Beata is also Eastern European, so she
Mm-hmm.
already has that kind of aggressive vibe to her from an American perspective anyway.
Yeah.
um I think Eastern Europeans have a very beautiful language and presentation about themselves, but I think Americans sometimes take that as very aggressive when it's not meant to be aggressive. They're just very blunt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think her coming in already strong as the like parent wanting to help their child plus the Eastern European aggression vibe like compacted, and then you have the unfortunate like nurse versus doctor mentality sometimes where this nurse is trying to tell me how to do my job. And it being so rare, I could see where the doctors came from the something doesn't feel right, because you are asking for a very extreme treatment. But on
Mm-hmm.
the other hand, they have documentation from other doctors and the treatment that was done and the results of it. It kind of surprised me there was so much pushback from the get-go.
Me too. Because so basically the people that work at Johns Hopkins are suspicious that maybe Beata is exaggerating these symptoms, that she's unnecessarily drugging her, that she's over medicating her. That maybe this is a situation of Munchausen by proxy or factitious disorder imposed on another. And if that was the case, then the investigation should happen, but it shouldn't stop at Maya's parents because they're not the ones prescribing the ketamine. So if this is something that shouldn't be prescribed to her and it's in unreasonable dosages and whatever, it's like then that needs to be looked into on even a higher level, because it's not like the parents are manufacturing the ketamine at home. Like they're getting it called into a Walgreens and they're
Right.
picking it up.
Right.
So it seems weird to me that like we're just like, oh well, you guys must have doctor shopped to find this solution. It's like, okay, but these are still real doctors that are currently practicing right now. So if they're doing something like that for no reason, then that needs to be investigated. It doesn't feel like that's
Yeah,
what happened though.
right. And you have looking at some of the other cases that we've looked at with Munchausen, like it was repetition of this of like harm. You know what I mean? Like they would go to the doctors all the time for all these
Mhm.
different things. And with Maya, she hadn't been to a lot of doctors. She went to a couple till they figured out the diagnosis. But once she had the diagnosis, they didn't go much further than that. And I feel
Yeah.
like with some of the other ones that we've looked at, they refused to accept diagnoses. It was like, no, that's not it. Or they wanted to collect all the diagnoses. When it came to Maya, once they had that diagnosis, they were like, okay, cool. Now how do we deal with it? And then that was it. Which kind of, I don't, at least for me, countered that like the Munchausen. You're not shopping. Once they got an answer, they were like, okay, let's manage it. Cool. Versus like our other ones we've talked about, they're like, okay, and that's great. She has this diagnosis, but what about this random thing that bothers her? Like, you know what I mean? There was
Mhm.
always something more. Um,
Yeah, it would be more, it would be, not substantiated. And also with factitious disorder imposed on another or Munchausen, when the mother is not with the patient, they tend to improve, which is
mhm.
not what we're seeing here. And also, even with like the ketamine coma and stuff like that. Like there was so much supervision. There were so many other people involved. Like this is not just a child being medicated at home and no one's watching it. And all of these symptoms are, I don't know. It all seems very weird the way that this was handled, and I feel like step
I felt very
1 would,
aggressive. Yeah.
like, are these doctors not communicating with each other? It's like phones
Yeah.
exist. Can we not
Yeah.
get them on the line? It's like, you're
Which we've had
prescribing this?
complaints about
Why?
before. Yeah. It's like, why
Yeah.
don't they just talk to each other?
Ugh, I know. It is true. And it's, of course, everything's like hindsight, 2020,
Oh, of course.
and
Mm-hmm.
you do want to think that all of the medical staff at Johns Hopkins is just thinking of Maya's best interests. And there are
Mm-hmm.
people who fake medical problems on children and abuse them and do
Mm-hmm.
it for attention and do it for,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not uncommon for someone who suffers from Munchausen by proxy to be a medical professional. It's not uncommon at all, or to at least have medical training and to use a lot of medical terminology, which Beata did as well. She wouldn't say snot. She would say, the technical terms for everything. She would say the medical words for everything. And I think that she was doing it because she is a nurse, so it is her profession. She does use these terms at work, but also because English isn't her first language. I think that sometimes when English isn't your first language, you don't always have 20 different words that you use for something when you're translating it to yourself.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
so her she's not American. She has an accent. She's pushy. She has medical training. She acts like she knows everything. And I think that it basically, like, people were offended by how Beata was
Mm-hmm.
acting. And her husband would, maybe agree that she was being very pushy and very demanding. And Maya's eventually taken into custody of the state, and Beata is not allowed to talk to her initially and is pressing to speak with her, calling, demanding to speak with her. And we just, hear these recordings of Jack absolutely flipping out on Beata, telling her that she needs to drop it, that they're never going to get Maya back, that she's handling it completely wrong and making everything worse. And I feel a little conflicted about that. Um, I'm really not sure the right way to handle this situation, because you don't want to just like take it lying down, but
Mm-hmm.
also, is there a benefit to just also being more, I don't know, agreeable, willing to comply with certain things? She was not willing to comply with things.
Not at the beginning.
Yeah, not at the
Because I
beginning.
think
And she would not
she set it down.
a little bit, but she wouldn't sign the case plan and she didn't agree to anything. She did things that were like court orders that she like had to do, but she didn't make it easy and she wasn't agreeable, which I'm not saying she needed to be, and I can understand her position, but I think it makes it
Yeah.
people less
So
inclined to help you sometimes.
sure. And I think she was just angry because they did
Definitely.
it kind of behind the family's back. So the
Mhm.
hospital social worker petitioned the court without the family's knowledge to get a judge to sign a shelter order, which basically put Maya in the custody of the state. And because of that, she ended up in the hospital for almost 3 months and assigned a social worker. And I think part of the problem I had, beside the fact of them kind of jumping the gun, but the social worker is really where I had my issue because I
Mm.
think it depends on the social worker's approach. And I think this specific one, I think her name was Beatty, Kathleen.
It was Kathy
Either
Beatty.
way, yeah, Beatty. I'm like, I know I'm gonna
Mhm.
pronounce it wrong. um, I
We could just
think
call
if
her
you
Kathy.
had Kathy, yeah, a social worker who was doing their best to find, like, the goal of that, if there is no abuse, is like to do the investigation, find out the abuse, and if there isn't, reunite the family. Children and Family Services, whole plan. And Kathy did not approach it that way. She very much became it kind of felt like she wanted to be Maya's mom, and like the
It
best
did
way to
feel
do
like
that
that.
was to push out the parents and keep reiterating that they were bad parents, even to Maya.
Yeah.
And I think that's really damaging and really toxic in that position. I think if you had a social worker who was truly doing their investigation with the goal of reunification, if possible, in the best interest of the child, then Beata wouldn't, she would have calmed down quicker. Because I think she only calmed down because her husband basically looked at her as like, and put things into full perspective of like, here is what is happening. Because I don't think she totally grasped the US DCF system. I
Mm.
don't think she totally understood the consequences of what she was doing until her husband sat down and was like, we could lose her forever if you don't cut it out. And that's when she kind of slowly stepped back. But this caseworker was like, they would have phone calls and she would terminate the calls early because of hypothetical medical issues or something she decided was inappropriate. She wouldn't let them even hold hands or come during the holidays. But then she would like cross physical boundaries where Maya would be like, "No, like let me move on my own," and she would like pick Maya up and move her after. And like there are reports of Maya screaming no while she was like forcibly moved around the hospital by the caseworker. She is reportedly crawling into the bed and hugging Maya again, and Maya's like, "Please don't touch me. You're a stranger to me." Like there's
Yeah.
some serious boundary violations, or like being asked to be called Mama Kathy, or like all these crazy things that I think if there was a different social worker, it would have ended differently. I have a lot of problems with this caseworker. Clearly.
Definitely. And I think it's super justified. And Maya even said, she said that um well, I mean, this is just Maya's version of what happened, but she said that Kathy would tell her that she was going to adopt her because her mom was never going to get her
Mhm.
back. That's
Yeah.
crazy inappropriate to a
Mhm.
child that is so vulnerable, who is medically fragile, who is trapped in a hospital, who has no access to her parents, her extended family, her friends. She has no one, and she's just stuck in the hospital. She's scared, and you're telling her that you're going to adopt her? Like, that's also, even if her parents lost custody forever, the social worker doesn't just get to take the kids home. That's not really how it
Mhm.
works. So it's crazy to say that, because let's say that was comforting to Maya. It's just not true. Also, you're not going to just get her. So I feel like she was
Right.
overstepping boundaries. She was being inappropriate. I don't know, had some sort of fixation with Maya, or she's crossing a lot of boundaries in general with her work. I mean, I don't know about her other cases and how she treated other kids that she was responsible for, but I thought that was all very creepy.
Yeah, and then through like they started digging into the casework because the family felt like it was creepy too. They're like, something's not right with this woman.
Yeah.
And turns out she had her own CPS investigation against her
Oh, yeah,
and
that's right.
things got dropped. But regardless, in my opinion, if you have a child abuse charge against you, you should not be able to be a child like protector. You shouldn't be able to work for CPS. Like or DCF or whatever acronym you want to choose.
Yeah.
Same way, in my opinion, of like, if you are a doctor and accused of killing someone on purpose, guess what? You shouldn't be a doctor anymore. Like, if
Yeah.
you, anything that counters the attorney, if you all of a sudden share private information, you shouldn't be an attorney anymore. Like, that should be consistent in every field. And the fact this woman had the exact same investigation on her that she's now doing on someone else, I think is insane. Insane.
Yeah, I definitely agree. She was a wackadoodle and she made everything worse. And I thought she was extreme. I mean, obviously, we only heard some of the clips of the phone calls between Beata and Maya, they really did not seem bad at all. What are you supposed to talk about? Like, they weren't allowed to talk about the case. They weren't allowed to talk about Maya's health. They weren't allowed to talk about pretty much Beata's feelings about
Family.
anything.
Yeah, and
So, like,
either of their opinions, their family, like
so
nothing.
that's a
Her
lot of the
her wellness.
topics.
Like,
Yeah. But it's like the kid's not in school because she's in the fucking hospital. She's not in sports. She's not at clubs. She's not seeing her friends. She's not doing anything. So what are you supposed to talk about?
mhm. Holidays are coming
I
up. You
don't
don't want to upset her, so you're not going to talk about the holidays.
Yeah, and exactly. And I feel like Beata was getting in trouble when they were talking about Thanksgiving too, that her Thanksgiving was a bummer. Okay, but you also shouldn't be like, yeah, it was the best Thanksgiving ever when your kid's in the hospital and you didn't see her. Like,
Yeah.
it's normal to say it wasn't a good Thanksgiving for the family. Everybody was pretty worried about you. That's
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what they were supposed to be able to talk about. They should have had them read the same book or something so they could talk about it together. Because all of the topics that would naturally come up, they were not allowed to discuss, which
Yeah.
I think is
And
bizarre.
then
And then
even on like things that they were allowed to talk about, she would like interject, which I thought was weird.
mhm,
Um,
yeah,
but
you're
either
supposed to
way.
be supervising.
So investigation kept going, and they really kept going harder and harder. They wanted them to engage in this plan, and they wanted pretty much them to admit that they were wrong. During one of the clips that they played for an interview with uh, Maya's dad, they basically presented the idea in better wording, but were you involved or were you complicit? Like they didn't give him the option of they very much were focused on Beata. Like she was the abuser. And they presented it to him of like, were you complicit in this behavior or were you involved in the behavior? And he was like, no. But the fact that they didn't, it was a very, you're going to pick which way your wife was the abuser, is kind of how they presented it, which is gross.
Yeah. They really wanted him to say too that if Maya got released to his custody, that he'd be willing to keep her away from her mother, um, which is pretty typical in cases like this, and it does make sense under a lot of circumstances. And that's the thing that's so hard with watching this, because in so many cases that we've covered, especially on this podcast, obviously with our topic in mind, there is child abuse going on. And so you would do everything you could to keep the child separated from their abusive parent in that situation. It does not feel like it's coming from a genuine place in this situation, but I could understand wanting to gauge how willing Jack would be to keep them separated. And is Jack really a threat, or is he willing to work with us and he's not abusive? So maybe just the mom is the problem, and maybe this kid can be released into someone else's custody. And this is the way we're going to get reunification. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it also does tear the family apart. So
Yeah.
in cases of false allegations of child abuse, which is my ultimate opinion of this situation, then it's so damaging in another way too, because it forces him to take sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so Jack eventually did get limited supervised visits with Maya, which I think were so important because this little girl was
Yeah.
alone for a very long time. And
Ugh.
like as a grown adult being alone in the hospital is scary and sad and crazy. Like
Mhm.
let alone being a child. So um I'm glad that they kind of did what they had to do for him to get some kind of visit with him, even though Beata was still completely allowed to like have any physical contact with her. At least she had a parent. Like at least someone
Yeah.
was able to get in there, which I think is so important. But we then kind of started to see the deterioration of Beata's strength and her fight and her faith that things were going to be okay.
Yeah. I mean, she was saying that she, wouldn't be able to live under these situations. That's what she's writing in response in emails. After Kathy, accused Beata of damaging Maya via phone calls, trying to get the phone calls terminated, she was losing hope. And then they had a day in court, and Beata had asked if she could just hug Maya because she was there, and she said no. I mean, the judge said no. He said no. So they weren't allowed to hug, and it was just completely devastating for Beata. She was having a very, very strong reaction, and I think we forgot to mention before that she did get a psychological evaluation by court order, and she had no evidence of having Munchausen by proxy or any other pathological illness like that. She apparently had an adjustment disorder and was depressed because her daughter had been taken into state custody, which I think is actually a pretty normal reaction in
I
that
think that's, if you
situation.
didn't have that, that would be a bigger red flag.
Yeah, like that's not an illness. It's a normal reaction to the situation that you're in. The very real possibility that you're going to be charged with child abuse, that you are going to lose custody of your child forever, and also when someone is a nurse and has a license and practices with patients, they're also held to different standards when it comes to work. And so even if she didn't go to prison for child abuse charges, if she was charged and convicted, or even charged and they're pending and she's going through these court battles and stuff, she could lose her license and be ineligible to practice, lose her livelihood. The bills are racking up: legal fees, medical bills. They're on the verge of bankruptcy. Marriage is
Yeah.
falling apart. I mean, this is some pretty bad, terrible, dire circumstances, and I think obviously this was just like the last straw for Beata, and she could not handle the situation that she was in anymore. Um, so Maya is in state custody for 87 days, and Beata was supposed to go to a birthday party with Jack and their son Kyle, but she said that she had a migraine and wasn't going to go, so she just wrapped the gifts, and the boys went to the party, and they came back and the bedroom door is closed, so they just thought that she was sleeping. And Beata's brother ended up coming over to the house and makes a horrific discovery, that Beata had committed suicide and she was in the garage. And there's a terrible 911 call. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and it's so devastating.
Yeah.
Like a tragic loss. And afterwards they found letters that she had written to the judge and to the family, apologizing to the family, giving instructions, taking care, please take care of Maya, all of this stuff. And then to the judge, it's pretty harsh, and saying that like you've ruined our lives, and like you're part of this terrible mechanism that's destroying us and torturing my child, and she's in constant pain because of this situation, and everything is just so bad. And Beata and a lot of the other people in this documentary pretty much blame the judge completely for what happened, which it's not completely the judge's fault, but I could see how this all happened and how this escalated to such a terrible conclusion.
Yeah. But like, she kind of got to a point where she didn't think there were any other options. That
Yeah.
she was the problem, and the best way to
Hmm.
protect her daughter and get her daughter back where she needed to be was that she wasn't there anymore. And how do you kind of, in from her perspective, how do you live knowing you can never see your daughter again?
Yeah.
And I I see how she felt like she was backed in a corner. And then to kind of support her mindset, Shortly after her death, the order was lifted and Maya was returned home. Like
Yeah.
it
So it did kind of work.
it did work. In a terrible, terrible result, she did get her daughter back into the safety of her family and really brought light onto the devastating consequences of jumping a gun and getting, we've said time and time again, once that DCF or CPS or whatever agency is local, once they're involved in your life, they never truly go away. Just because the case is closed doesn't mean they don't check up on you, doesn't mean they show up once in a while. Like it's it's a really terrible, but it's one of the few things in our system where you are not innocent until proven guilty. In that system, you are guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah.
And in the cases that are real and actually happening, 100% we should be stringent, we should be safe. You should always proceed on the side of caution. But at what point is there a middle ground? Our justice system is innocent and proven guilty. How is it when you're you're so easily flipped when it's your own children? Like people joke all the time that you don't need to take a test to have a kid. Like you go get pregnant, have the baby, and you go home. Like there's no test on who's a good parent. Who,
Yeah.
if you aren't going to judge people in the hospital having their baby, how do you judge someone after they've already had them? You know what I mean? Like it's a weird, I don't think any system in our country is good and perfect, but it feels like this one has more flaws than others.
It's so tricky, and the part of the problem is that you never really know what goes on behind closed doors and like what families are like when no one is
Mhm.
watching. So it's a lot of going with your gut and building cases and trying to figure it out as you go. But at the time of the investigation, real people, their real lives, their real families absolutely being torn apart. And you never really
Mhm.
recover from this, like financially, mentally, emotionally. It, the consequences can be generational. And
Yeah.
it's there's such a high burden and standard because it's also you don't want to be the social worker, the judge, the cops that let a child stay in a situation where they are ultimately abused further, murdered, terrible. The stakes are as high as they can be, pretty much. And you don't want to send a kid into a bad situation. And I feel like right now we could talk about obviously Dr. Sally Smith and the whole system, and is there an extremely high number of medical child abuse cases at this one hospital where it statistically doesn't even seem possible that there could be this many? Sure. But just in general, too, I think that this is a hot topic at the moment, and it's something that we've become much more aware of. And certain cases like with Gypsy Rose Blanchard and with Natalia Grace and with like these very high profile cases where are they lying? Are they faking it? Are these medical conditions real? It it changes the way we think about it. It changes the way the system looks at it. And is it better to take a kid out and do an investigation where they're removed from the people that are potentially hurting them? Or is that even more damaging to not just the child, but everybody else too? Clearly, the
Yeah.
parents get extremely damaged by this as well. And I think that for someone who is innocent, who I believe Beata was totally innocent, this would be so devastating. And you would feel like every single decision that you've made was the wrong one and that you're just a barrier to the daughter even getting help because the whole time the mother's being investigated, she's not getting appropriate treatment. And so
Right.
the stakes are incredibly high for everybody. And I don't know what the solution is because you can't just hit pause on time and like freeze time and just wait and see what happens. You have to act. And I think for it's probably usually better to take a child out of a situation while you investigate. But it's just for the
Yeah.
people who happen to be innocent, it's obviously horrific.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very sad. And kind of fast forwarding a little bit,
Yeah.
the case they did end the Kowalskis ended up opening a case against John Hopkins,
Mm-hmm.
and that and also it was traumatic in itself
Sure.
because no you're going up against a multi-million dollar corporation where they have attorneys already on retainer, but they have the money to draw it out, which is
Right.
where we see a lot of families they stop because they can't afford to fight anymore from a financial perspective. Attorneys aren't
Right.
cheap, let alone ones that are willing to take on one of the largest hospitals in the area. um, and they kept pushing back, and the case got pushed back and pushed back, and that's dramatic on the family in itself because you're
Mm-hmm.
constantly living and reliving something that was very traumatic for you guys. So we saw that kind of towards the end, their processing and their battle. And but one thing that was good about Beata is she wrote down everything. She was so
Yes.
meticulous. There we go.
Meticulous. Yeah.
I was like, that's not the right word. She was like very detail oriented. Every single conversation, every single doctor, every question, everything, which really made the ability to show where the doctors were not being truthful or thorough or whatever the case is. And that's how they ended up eventually winning that case,
Yeah.
which came
It
out,
also,
I think November of 2023 is the final verdict came out.
yes. Um, well, like I said this before, I think, but Beata refused to sign any of the case plans that were offered to
Yeah.
her. And that preserved the ability to sue the hospital because the hospital had not been released from liability and Dr. Smith had not been released from liability. And so they were able to sue for damages and punitive damages, which is when you get
Mm-hmm.
like a very big settlement. I think it also helped that so many other families came out of the woodwork with very similar situations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was heartbreaking and terrible for the family to go through these lawsuits. They were ultimately, well, they were initially awarded $261 million, and then it was reduced to $47.5 million, which is a lot of money.
I couldn't find the reasoning for the reduction because they had 211 million for Maya, specifically for medical negligence, intentional infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment, and then Jack got the 50 million emotional distress, suffering, wrongful death of his wife, which
Yeah,
all feels valid.
I mean that really all did happen. Um, so it says my notes say that there was a remitter, which is, I just looked it up, a trial court order in response to an excessive damage award or verdict by a jury, which gives the plaintiff the option to accept a reduced damage award or conviction. So I think it's almost like they took a plea or something, like I guess the hospital, like that they wouldn't actually be able to do the 261 million, so they were able to appeal it, just the amount, and get a
Mm.
reduction. It's the plaintiff requesting it though.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't find anything on it. Everything that I found was still at the because it was a jury verdict. But
Yeah,
I
it's
genuinely don't
it's
know.
it's an
I hope
appeal
they got
thing.
all 260.
I don't think so. I think they got I think they got the 47.
Yeah, I see. I'm just double checking it that the appeal was put in, but I don't see the appeal being accepted anywhere. Either way, I mean, it's life-changing money at the end of the day.
Oh, definitely.
Where you're never going to have a number that brings back your mom. You're never going to have a number that brings back your wife. You're never going to be able to fill that void. It's just the reality. It's not going to happen. But having the case end does bring that ability to have closure of
Yeah.
that chapter. And that's a long chapter to be suffering. And over time, now that the case is over, you're really able to start healing because you can't heal when you're constantly being deposed. You can't heal when you're waiting on a court result. You can't heal. Like, this finally gives the family the ability to slowly try to rebuild themselves because you're never going to move on, but you can start to build and live the life that Beata would have wanted them all to live.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that this has brought some closure for the family. And I hope that they're able to rebuild their lives. It seems like Maya's doing pretty well, all things considered. She's done a ton of physical therapy and she can walk now. She's not in the wheelchair, but she still has some like physical limitations, and it seems to be a lifelong condition. Like she's not going to just
Yeah,
be
she's going
magically
to.
cured. Yeah. One of the Oh my gosh, one of the things that I don't think we said this, that was so infuriating to me was that the hospital was billing her insurance for CPRS treatments for 3 months while
Well, telling them that she
accusing
didn't have it.
yeah, while saying the parents were faking it and that it was child abuse. Okay, but then why are
Right.
you treating it if it's
Instant
like a made up
anger.
disease? So infuriating. Infuriating. I feel like it's such a scam. It's so terrible that one doctor has a wild vendetta and she has a astronomic amount of medical child abuse cases that she's uncovered in her career. And that's a whole other that, you know what, she would probably make a very good episode on her own as well.
Yeah, digging into that because I didn't realize because they started showing people around the country in the end of this
Mhm,
documentary and all tracing it back to her. So
exactly.
that's a good point because it's not like all of these people that they started mentioning were just people in Florida. Like we saw Massachusetts, California, Ohio, like around the country.
Mhm,
All some were imprisoned. Some are still in prison. Like lives destroyed all because of this one woman. It is very
yeah.
interesting.
And I'm sure sometimes she was correct about medical child abuse taking place. But just statistically, it can't be possible that she's uncovered it this many times. It does not make
That
sense.
every one of your patients was abused.
It's wild. I mean, if anything, that is a big red flag in itself that everyone you come into contact with is medically abusing their kids. It does not seem possible. But I think that would be
Yeah.
like a interesting deep dive to do. Um, yeah. Do you have any final thoughts about this documentary?
No, I definitely suggest watching it if you guys haven't yet because we watch a lot of them, but this was one of the ones that it hit a little different and it was
Hmm.
presented in a very nice way. I really enjoyed the way that the producers put it together. And I ended up having to watch it more than once cuz the first time I just got really engrossed in it and
Hmm.
wasn't really able to like separate myself as much as I normally do. Cuz I think it just really shows the possibility and the dangers of people who don't fully look into things or abuse power or it really can show how damaging words and accusations can really be.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
What about you?
It's an inter- no, it's an interesting case. I feel like it's good to keep in mind that people can be falsely accused of things. And that an accusation does not mean that you're guilty, even though I feel like we've kind of gone back and forth about that a little bit about like how strongly we need to treat accusations and how that's like so important to treat accusations seriously, but also sometimes they're incorrect. People can lie, things can be misinterpreted, confusion, like there's all kinds of circumstances that can happen. And I think it's just interesting for us to like take a departure where it's this mother was accused of heinous, horrible things, but we don't think that she did it. And sometimes people are falsely accused and there can still be really big, terrible consequences. And yeah, I found it a moving documentary. I feel like I learned things, felt things, and yeah, I enjoyed it. I would recommend to watch as well.
Yeah. Well, that was Miss Maya. Again, the documentary is on Netflix, and again, it's an easy watch too, which I like.
Yeah, I really liked it. All right, well, we'll pick up back here next week with our next mother.
Till next time.
Bye.